Welcome to EpiSTEM Podcast. This EpiSTEM podcast is brought to you from the National Centre of STEM Education at the School of Education in the University of Limerick. I'm your host, Geraldine Simmie, and I'm the Professor of STEM Education here at the Centre and the Director of EpiSTEM. And my co-host,
Michelle Starr, and I am the Research Liaison Officer in EpiSTEM.
Oh, very welcome back to the podcast today. We are joined by a very special guest here, Associate Professor Donal Canty. You're very welcome, Donal.
Thanks, Geraldine.
Yeah, welcome, Donal.
Thanks, Michelle.
And Donal is the Associate Professor of Education. He works in pedagogy and the technology section of the School of Education. And he's also the Deputy Head of the School of Education as well here in UL. Donal, how did you come into this whole space of education?
So, Geraldine, I come from a farming background in North Kerry. I'm the son of a truck driver and a farmer. My mother managed the farm along with my father. He was the part-time farmer. But growing up, education was always a priority in our house, and it was probably prioritised because my father couldn't wait to get out of school.
Yeah.
And he left in fifth year and the world was his oyster. But very quickly he realised that to open doors for your future, that education was important. He went back himself and he did an agricultural course, and he thought that might get him various different bits and pieces at the time. But an opportunity came up with a company to drive, and he loved driving, and he got a job and he kind of stuck with that for the rest of his life. But he always recognised that education was a key to unlocking many, many doors. My mother she loved school. She loved going to school. But when she got just after her leaving cert, her father took ill and she had to stay home and take over the farm and run the farm, and she wanted to be a teacher. So there was two girls. She was the eldest of the two, so she was kept at home, and her sister was sent off to be the teacher. And it's something that I know she always had a graw for. Neither of the two of them pushed us in any particular direction, but what they did do was they would have encouraged us to do what we wanted to do and to do it to the best of our ability. And they did everything that they could to provide for that, whatever that was. And if you were going to be a carpenter or if you were going to be a rocket scientist, it didn't matter once you were happy doing it and you gave it your best shot.
Yeah. Isn't that a lovely gift that they gave, because they weren't giving you the end point, but they valued the education. I mean, I can identify that in my own childhood. My own mother was from Kerry, and I can identify for her as well that valuing of education big time. Yeah.
And for me, there was a little bit of a challenge when I was finishing primary school, where I liked school as well. Academically, I was strong, and there was a decision around go to the CBS type school, or where my other brothers were going, which was a secondary school, convent school that were taking in boys now, and it was a very prestigious school. And a good school, but my father and my mother knew I was very practically minded. My grandfather was a blacksmith, and that love of materials and engineering and all of that type of thing was breaking through. And I liked maths and I liked physics. I liked all of those things, and I wanted to go to the school where we had the practical subjects, and that school was the community college in Tralee. And there were some people that were kind of taken a little bit aback that I was going to the community college, but my father and mother, they were very adamant. That's what he wants to do. That's what he's good at.
Yes.
If he's happy there, isn't that the main thing? That you go in the door of the school smiling, and you come back out the door of the school smiling.
Of course,
and
they were forward thinking in that, because there was a lot of things done. I mean, we were in a small village, but we were divided when we were age 12. We were divided out into the townies and then the people who were from the countryside, and that's how the subjects were done. We were called into the hall, and some were sent in science and some were sent other places, and all this kind of thing went happened. So there was a bit of all that. That's all there in the history, but it's a great story, the valuing piece.
Yeah, it is, and actually, it's a reiteration of what historically, and it still goes on. You know that, as you were saying, that some might have looked at school differently than others, and that's still there. I mean, we see it. But your parents had that foresight of going for knowing you, and I think it's great for when you know your child, and you know get them educated to the way they would like to be educated rather than doing it another way.
Yeah, and what I learned from it as well is I was happy going to school.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
so
the subject. No, there just happened to be a great bunch of in that year that we were going through, and we had great fun. We were quite successful in sport, playing football and things in the school, Tralee Community College that particular year. At Leaving Cert, we won an All-Ireland vocational schools. And so it was kind of an all-round piece. But for me, and what I bring into my job now is that if you have a kid that's going into school happy and coming out the door happy, that's the first step in, because we wanted to learn, we were happy to learn, and the teachers loved coming into us.
And that joy of learning, you don't hear too much about it now. No. So it's fantastic that we can offer that to our students here in UL, all of the students that are with us doing, we've hundreds, if not thousands of students doing the initial teacher education, and for us to be able to pass that on, that joy, because we want them as teachers to be able to actually come from there when they're teaching as well, to really enjoy what they do and be able to bring on that love of learning, and all of that was the valuing of that is very important. Tell me about your role as, I know you were a teacher, you were working here as a lecturer, now you're a senior lecturer, and for the last number of years I've known you in the other role as the deputy head of the School of Education. What do you think you bring into leadership in that role for the school? It's a big school now. We've over 50 or thereabouts faculty, plus probably hundreds of additional adjunct faculty with us. Yeah,
I would hope that I bring a hard work ethic and a bit of common sense. Like the university it's a big place. With the amount of students and the number of programs we have, there are multiple factors that have to be considered all at the same time. And that is from scheduling to resources to the staff and different people and strengths and characteristics. And then you have a student body that is quite diverse, and all sorts of things pop up at all sorts of times. And it's about knowing what to prioritise, when to prioritise it, what to, when to put the arm around and console and help and give care. And also, there's a time when maybe some truths need to be told, and people need to be told, how to.
It's that lovely mix of support and challenge.
And I would hope that I would try to build relationships between people, so that between the staff, but also between the staff and the student body as well. We have a common interest.
We do. We do. And at the heart of it is good relationships.
At the heart of it is good relationships. If you want to try and get the best out of everybody, whether that's a colleague or whether that's a student.
Yes.
And again, my goal is always that 12-year-old kid that's sitting in a school somewhere, and I have a group of initial teacher education students in front of me, and what I'm thinking is, how can I make you the best teacher possible to impact on that 12-year-old kid that's going to come into first year in a school, and you're going to potentially influence them for the next 5-6 years of their life, potentially influence them in terms of the career that they're going to take on. And that's more than just teaching them subject content, that they will be very good at their engineering, or they're very good at their graphics, or very good at whatever it is.
Very much,
so there's a lot of things that you try to bring to it, and through that deputy head role, you kind of get to look beyond your own teaching and look across the spectrum of all of the disciplines that we teach, and just to try and ensure that can happen for all of our students.
It's almost is done in the air, but the idea you have to recognise and see the pupil first, see the student, and then whatever your subject is, whether it is physics or technology or whatever the subject is, you can teach it then, but you really must recognise that child and that young person. They have to be and of course maybe your sport and all of that team building, maybe that's brought you where nobody has to explain to you that education's a relationship of learning.
So when people ask me, what do you teach? I will always respond, I teach kids. And my subject happens to be second, and that's my area of expertise when I was in a secondary school. And when you talk about the sporting piece, I was a goalkeeper. So I was the last line of defence, and I think my approach in management is I don't need to be the person scoring the goals and getting all that. I very much kind of play from behind and watch that. Okay, make sure that everything is in place. Make sure that we have who we need, where we need them, and that they're there. They're happy to be there. They're resourced, and allow them to do their job. And
I love that.
I'll save now and again and pick up the pieces, and sometimes you get a penalty in the last minute and you save it, and you get
an own goal as well,
and you get a win. Very few of those, but yeah. So you definitely do bring something from that sporting field that you know I need to get the best out of who's with me.
You do,
and you bring that to your leadership.
You do. Yeah. And Donal, in your years now here in UL and your deputy lead in the School of Education, have you seen a lot of change in the system itself? Now, maybe not just IT, but also in the second level educational system, and because you talk about that relationship, building that relationship, and the teachers building that relationship and empathy with the student. Do you think that has changed, or was it there? Is it more? Because you don't hear an awful lot of teachers talk. You do hear teachers, but you don't hear it in the big picture.
Yeah, I suppose one of the major changes, like I went through the programs here as a student. I was the first teaching assistant that was actually employed back on these programs, back in the mid-90s, and that's when numbers were starting to increase. So my class would have had maybe 24 maximum in it. And now you're talking about 70 or 80 per year.
Wow.
And so they started to take on teaching assistants to help with the teaching load. And what is challenging for any of the academics that are teaching big groups is to try and develop that relationship. And we are lucky that we have teaching assistants that very much kind of help to bridge that piece. But I'll always try and be involved in teaching some of the labs to get to know those people, but also the lectures to try and switch it over a bit, and that it's not all one-way traffic, that it's very much, it's a teaching opportunity and a learning opportunity, and you try to get to know them as best you can. So the numbers increase definitely makes it challenging. In second level schooling, I think the new junior cycle has some very positive aspects to it, particularly for me. The likes of the classroom-based assessments, I think, are an opportunity for teachers and pupils to engage with assessment together.
Yes.
And it's that kind of zone of proximal development and what you can do with a more learned other kind of with you, and that the teacher and the pupil are there working together, thinking about the criteria, thinking about what do I need to do, and they shape it. And it's something then that it's a snapshot in time where it's not high stakes, but it says to Donal, here's what you need to work on now to get to this next level. And it's not a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 or whatever. It's described in terms of the features of quality, and they know then if I work on this, then when the big project comes at the end, I'll have developed the skills and the attributes to be able to handle that with a bit of confidence.
Yes. What I can see here, like on your own research specialism, and looking here at one of your papers on that investigation you did with others here on student-teacher assessment literacy, that development, and you used, I suppose, the theoretical framework there of Zhu and Brown, a very multifaceted, multidimensional, holistic education. Now, it makes sense to me that you would have used this, but our colleague Nikki Blom, and I see friends of ours, Jeff Buckley and Ronan Dunbar, and our friend Niall Seary is with you as well.
Yep.
And it's fantastic that you've used this multifaceted, multidimensional, holistic package around this teaching the student teachers, this assessment literacy. Do you want to talk to me a bit about what that paper was trying to get at?
Yeah, so I suppose my journey with assessment, it really started when I was out teaching myself in second level schools, and I had a classroom where I would create loads of opportunities for kids to learn and to do various different bits and pieces. But at a particular point in time, assessment tips you on the shoulder and says, that's all lovely now, but this is what's going to be graded and this is what's going to be marked. And we were lucky in the technology subjects that we have, that there's a design-based philosophy behind them that allows the kids to imagine and create and all of the things that I value.
Yes.
But then you need to try and show the evidence of that, and sometimes that can be challenging, and then you have to fit with certain criteria and so on, and the kids would, where are the marks going kind of thing.
Yes.
So I always had an interest in assessment and the impact that it would have on me as a teacher, and also the impact that it would have on learners. But I did recognise early on there's a skill set associated with assessment and a knowledge base associated with assessment that we need to develop. And when I made the transition from being a teacher in a secondary school to an academic in a third level institution, there is a difference. And the research space obviously was going to be one of them. And my decision at the time was I'm going to engage in research that, number one, I had a passion about, and number two, something where I felt maybe I could make a difference here.
Yes.
And what I was recognising is that some of the skill set that I had built up over the years of teaching, through academic reading, maybe through talking with colleagues, through engaging with assessment and struggling with assessment, that there is a skill set and that knowledge base that we need to try and develop within our ITE programs. And if you read the literature, they will talk in that Jean Brown paper and many other papers, they talk about that it's not very strategic when you look at ITE programs across the world, how we actually develop the assessment literacy piece, and that sometimes it's kind of expected that it will happen, and it will happen over time as you're in practice. Yes. So I engaged with thinking around assessment back in the early noughties, and my PhD was in this space of assessment and using comparative judgment. So in this paper, I'm using comparative judgment with a particular aim to help develop assessment literacy of students. And just to briefly maybe explain the comparative judgment piece, when we're trying to develop this skill of assessment, sometimes we struggle to measure things exactly. Mm-hmm. So if I said to you, here's an apple, mm-hmm. what weight is it? And you'll give me an estimate of mm-hmm. it's so many grams or whatever it is. And unless you're a fruit merchant or somebody that's dealing with the likes of that all the time, your guess mightn't be that accurate. But if I gave you 2 apples, or if I gave you an apple and an orange, and if I asked you just a different question, but still about weight, which one is heavier, you'll be very accurate in your assessment of that. So what I notice is that, we can build up a knowledge base by comparison. So if we take 2 pieces of work by a student, or if we compare 2 singers, 2 songs, 2 football players or something like that, we can say, I think this one is better, but I'm not sure are they a 6 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, but I just know one is better for a particular context. So I was working with that, and what I actually began to see, and this was being used initially for summative assessment by Professor Richard Kimball in Goldsmiths University in the UK. And when I was looking at it, I thought, okay, it can do that, but I also think that this is a really useful tool for our students to begin that assessment journey. And in this paper, I talk about some of the activities that we do with them and how it has, opened their eyes to certain aspects of assessment. And one thing that I do with them early on in the module is I give them a little activity notes. So they're teachers of engineering and construction and graphics and that. So I give them a little sketching activity, which would be a key skill mm-hmm. that we use to communicate mm-hmm. in our discipline. But what I do is they're broken up in different lab groups, and I give some of them a lot of resources, and I give them extra time to create a little sketch. It's a simple sketch, maybe a piece of fruit or something like that. And they'll have the criteria on size, proportion, colour, all of those things. Another group, I might give them very little time to do it. I might give them very little resources. You only get a pencil. You only get 2 colours. And others, then I give them supported instruction to do it. But we put all of the pieces then for assessment
together
into this software piece by RM Compare. They're a company in the UK that have a comparative judgment assessment instrument. And we get them then to make their judgments. And the judgment is you just have to compare 2 pieces of work, and there's an algorithm running in the background that creates a rank order from the best to the least good piece of work. And so they go in and they do this, and after they do this, I have the rank order, and I can pick out all the pieces of work. Another piece that I put in a rogue piece that I've taken off the internet that is of a really, really high quality, and it's put in there as well. And I don't tell them anything about it. When we get into the next lecture and we start to present and talk about the analysis of what they experienced, I'd ask them, any questions? And some of them from the group that probably had very little time and very little resource say, did everybody have access to the same thing? So in other words, was this a fair assessment? And then it gets established that, well, they had extra time, they had tuition, they had this. And when they come across the really excellent one, they're quite obvious that, it wasn't produced within the group. They will have, some of them will say, well, I caused that one to lose because I didn't believe that it was a valid piece. But I come back to them and say, well, was that your call? This was part of the assessment, and your action was to make a judgment. Was it better? Is it an actual better sketch? And they say, well, it is. But why did you decide to? But what it does is it unlocks, the process itself is useful for them to make a judgment, but it's what happens afterwards. In terms of the analysis of everything that went on, there's ethical pieces coming into it. There's knowledge of the criteria, the qualities, the features of quality, then how good is good and what is excellent and so on.
Yes.
Comes into play. But it opens up a huge dialogue where they're able to articulate and begin to internalize, okay, these are the things that impact on assessment, the quality of students' work. But also there's a piece with them because they could be assessing their own work.
Of course, yes.
They could be assessing their friends' work. So this bias piece comes in.
Yes.
And there's a...
So the whole, I mean, from what you're saying, Donal, like, is that there's a huge learning there into it's really a deep look into assessment. But I suppose I'm thinking as well, and I know this is an interest of yours, the danger of, let's say, with being just, let's say, it being a predetermined and it all been given, and them seeing those dangers here are forestalled by affectivity being important and culture and context and all this other thing. So there is in this actual framework, there's a way of wobbling that, because I mean, I don't know that we want really students, teachers to always feel the teachers must be always comparing themselves to somebody else either for anxiety. How do you forestall that with the students?
So the comparative piece here is, it's just around which piece is better. You're not necessarily saying that it's a 10 out of 10 or a 6 or a 5 or whatever. And it's not a norm.
Yes.
Norms-based curve. We get the top piece of work at the rank, which let's say that was excellent.
Yes.
The bottom piece equally could be excellent.
Yes.
But we have that conversation.
So it's a discussion. It's to give them the language of being able to become good at professional judgment.
At professional judgment. Because at the end of the day, an assessment is a comparison, whether it's against criteria or whether it's against another piece of work. And we all know that the nature of us as assessors is, we'll have a read, we'll have a look at we'll compare it to another piece of work. And that was an excellent one. And how does this compare to it? So sometimes it's not a direct comparison, but
and
it's
I
still
know
a
as
comparison.
Teachers, we'd worried that if it was that we were always looking for external criteria, we might again miss the child in front of us in because they wouldn't have all the resources and the care and all the other things. So sometimes, how does the teacher get that confidence to make that call? That's the piece that it'd be interesting as well if we're going to care for Johnny and Mary and that actually comes up as part of the discussion here around that when we have to try and benchmark these things to, we'll say, the outputs for the junior cycle, so exceptional, in line with expectations, yet to meet expectations, that this performance might have been excellent for that particular student from where they have been. Yes.
And now, but we have to try and benchmark it on either a class basis or a national kind of standard or whatever.
Yes, of course.
And the challenges around that are they're difficult.
They are.
And we get to unpack those through the dialogue around assessment here. Also, what turns up here is this. So when you have a teacher and they're making a judgment that they know may have an emotional impact on a learner, and the feedback that they give. So part of this process is they can give and receive feedback, and they do an analysis on their own feedback.
And I suppose we're not very good at teaching people how to do that in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one area we really could do better. I think it must do better for universities generally, I think.
Absolutely.
How to do feedback. I mean, what do you think?
I'm just amazed at this research because just going back and over a few little things, because we're so used to this high-risk summative test within our system, which we've the Leaving Cert, the Junior Cert. And now you're talking about more formative assessments, which you're developing with the students. And that as you were, as I was listening to you talk about, the different, the comparative judgments, but it was showing up the inequalities in behind. That's what you were doing. And this, this is great because there are inequalities there with all the students in front of them. So what I'm trying to get in my head is, do you think down the road through this formative, this use of formative assessments where teachers build that relationship with the children, understand, okay, this result is as good as you could expect because of the social class, whatever is going on in the background with the child's, life. And they don't have the, the economic capital maybe to get this extra tuition, etc., etc. Do you think, will it ever wipe out inequalities? Because we always end up at this big summative, don't we, at the end of the assessment?
We do. And that has its challenges. And, you know, you can talk about, well, there is an element of fairness in it and that it's the same for everybody, but it's the experience of getting as far as it is certainly not the same for everybody. And that's what we're kind of showing the kids here. We're creating that inequality. And then is it fair to make your judgment based on that inequality? It's a really challenging one. Probably the fairest and most valid assessment that I have experienced as a teacher was with Leaving Cert Applied. Where my Leaving Cert Applied students, at the end, they engage in a kind of a project and different activities, and the assessor comes in, the marker comes in, and he sits down with them, and they talk to them.
Wow.
And it's like a Viva
It's a dialogue.
It's a dialogue with them. And they get to hear more from the kid, you know, than might be represented on paper, because you know that paper and sketch and all, they have a limitation.
Yes.
And that for me was the most valid assessment that I have come across in my time. Now, there's a piece associated with that in terms of time and cost and resources.
Why not?
But we have to start looking at that, because there were aspects of my students that were in Leaving Cert Applied that I always felt they'll get to show that day, that the paper mightn't tell for them or whatever. And equally, I know I had students in 5th and 6th year that were engaging in, you know, designerly type activities, project work and stuff like that. And that sometimes the real, the innovation or the creativity or the level of problem solving that they did, it was just hard to capture in a particular medium.
Well, I think it's a fantastic, it's a topic we could talk on for the rest of the day, but we probably have to put a wind up on it now. But just to say thank you so much, Associate Professor Donal Canty, for being with us today. It's been fabulous listening, and I suppose that depth in assessment and at learning for formative learning, but also inside a system that is not, you know, there's a bit of myth of meritocracy that it isn't the same for everyone, and yet the importance of all the things you've said, like the knowledge, the care, the ethics, the whole lot is in there. So just dig deep and keep going with that research. It's fabulously interesting. Thank you so much.
I will do.
Thanks, Donal. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll be played out with some music today. We have Azar Mahmood, who's a world music student here in the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance. So I'm looking forward now to Azaz and what he's going to offer us today for our musical interlude.
Standing out into the night, and they're trying to hide the pain. I'm going to the place where love and a feeling good don't never cost a thing. And the pain, it feels a different kind of pain. I'm going home to the place where I belong, where love is always being enough for me. I'm running from no think you got me all wrong. Don't regret this life just for me. But these places and these faces are getting old. But these places and these faces are getting old. I'm going home. Well, I'm going home. The miles are getting longer, it seems. The closer I get to you. Not always been the best man, a friend for you, but love remains true. I don't know why. Always seem to give me another try. I'm going home to the place where I belong, where love is always being enough for me. I'm running from no think you got me all wrong. Don't regret this life just for me. But these places and these faces are getting old. But these places and these faces are getting old. I'm going home. Be careful what you wish for, 'cause you just might get it all. 'Cause you just might get it all, when some you don't want. Be careful what you wish for, 'cause you just might get it all. 'Cause you just might get it all, yeah. I'm going home to the place where I belong, where love is always being enough for me. I'm running from, no, think you got me all wrong. Don't regret this life just for me. But these places and these faces are getting old. But these places and these faces are getting old.